My dad signed my name and stole my company shares. He didn't expect my revenge. There's a specific kind of silence that follows betrayal. Not the silence of a room with no people in it. The silence of a room where someone just handed you a document that has your name on it, your signature, your handwriting, and you know with complete certainty that you never signed it. That's where Adam Karimi found himself on a Thursday morning in March 2019, sitting in the offices of a corporate law firm in Karachi, Pakistan. He was 29 years old. He had spent the last 4 years of his life building something from almost nothing, a logistics and supply chain software company called TrackBridge Solutions, and he had done it alongside the one person in the world he trusted more than anyone else. His father. The document on the table was a share transfer deed. It was dated 6 months earlier, September 2018. It transferred 40% of Adam's founding equity stake, worth an estimated 34 million Pakistani rupees at the company's last valuation, to a holding entity registered in his father's name. The signature at the bottom was Adam's. Except Adam had never held that pen. He looked at the lawyer across the table, then at the notary stamp, then at the date. His hands were completely still. And in that moment, something shifted inside him. Not rage, not tears. Something quieter and far more dangerous than either of those. He folded the document, placed it back on the table, and said 4 words that nobody in that room expected. "Thank you. I see." What happened over the next 18 months would become one of the most carefully executed legal and business reversals in the private sector history of that city. But nobody saw it coming, least of all his father. To understand what happened, you have to go back to a specific neighborhood in Karachi, the old commercial district of Sadar, where the streets smell of engine oil, cardamom tea, and ambition in roughly equal measure. It's a place that has been making and breaking families since the 1950s. 4-story concrete buildings with hand-painted signs. Entire floors converted into offices where men in half-pressed shirts negotiate deals worth millions before noon prayers. The kind of place where a handshake still means something, but where a forged signature means more. In October 2015, Adam Karimi rented a single room on the 3rd floor of a building on Zaibanisa Street. The room was 180 square feet. It had one window that looked out onto a concrete wall, one ceiling fan that made a grinding sound every 11 seconds, and one folding table he had borrowed from his mother's kitchen. He was 25 years old and had just left a mid-level analyst job at a freight forwarding company after 3 years of watching the same problem go unsolved. The supply chain across Pakistan's manufacturing corridor was fragmented, inefficient, and almost entirely paper-based. Hundreds of small manufacturers in cities like Faisalabad, Sialkot, and Gujranwala were losing between 12% and 18% of their operational margins every year simply because they had no real-time visibility into where their goods were, when trucks had departed, or whether customs clearance had been initiated. Adam had watched this for 3 years. He had made notes. He had built, on a second-hand laptop, a rough prototype of a tracking and documentation dashboard that he believed could solve it. But a prototype is not a company. And a company needs more than one person. That's where his father came in. Tariq Karimi was 54 years old in 2015. He was not a technology man. He was a trader, textiles mostly, with 28 years of contacts across the supply chain Adam was trying to automate. He had the relationships. He had the trust of the very manufacturers Adam needed as clients. And he had one other thing that Adam, at 25, did not: credibility. In Pakistan's commercial ecosystem, a young man with a laptop and a rough idea gets polite smiles. A young man with a father who's been in the business for 3 decades gets meetings, and so, in December 2015, Adam and Tariq Karimi registered TrackBridge Solutions as a private limited company. Adam held 60% of the shares. Tariq held 40%. The founding documents, signed by both men in front of a notary on Shah Faisal, were clean, legal, and clear. What they did not write down, what no one ever thinks to write down with family, was what would happen if one of them stopped believing in the other. In the early days, The skepticism came from everywhere. At a small business networking dinner in Lahore in early 2016, a logistics industry veteran named Hafiz Bhatti, who had been in the freight forwarding business since before Adam was born, listened politely to a 3-minute pitch from Adam and then said, with a kind smile, "Beta, these small manufacturers don't want software. They want someone to pick up the phone when something goes wrong." The comment drew quiet laughter from the 6 other men at the table. Adam nodded and said, "Nothing." In an industry WhatsApp group that several of TrackBridge's potential clients were part of, someone posted in mid-2016 that they had tried the app and found it slower than calling on the phone. The message was forwarded 30 times. 2 early-stage clients who had been in conversation with Adam quietly stopped returning his calls after that. Within the Karimi family itself, the whispers were harder to ignore. Adam's uncle, his father's older brother, a man who ran a successful import business and whose opinion Tariq valued deeply, sat down with Tariq at a family gathering in August 2016 and reportedly told him that the company was a child science project dressed up in a suit, and that Tariq was throwing good money and his name into something that had no future. What nobody in those conversations saw was the pattern Adam had already noticed, because while they were talking, he was watching the data. But what made the situation truly complicated, and what Adam would not understand until much later, was that his father had started listening. Not to Adam. To the others. By late 2017, 2 years into the business, TrackBridge had signed 11 mid-sized manufacturing clients. Revenue was modest, 2.3 million rupees for the year, but the product was tightening. Adam had brought in 2 developers, a young woman named Sana Rashid who would become a key part of the company's technical backbone, and a business development hire named Imran. The growth curve was slow, but it was a curve. And curves have direction. The real problem wasn't what people were saying publicly. The real problem was what Adam's father had started believing privately, and that, as it turned out, was the beginning of everything. If you had met Adam Karimi in 2016 or 2017 and tried to guess which part of the story he would turn out to be, you would probably have guessed wrong. He was not loud. He did not take up space in a room the way people who later become known for something often do in retrospect. He was medium height, quietly dressed, usually a plain shalwar kameez or a collared shirt, and he had a habit of listening to people for slightly longer than they expected before he responded. It made some people uncomfortable. It made others feel unusually heard. He had grown up watching his father work, not as an observer from a distance, but as an active participant. From the age of 12, Adam had accompanied Tariq on textile market visits in Faisalabad on school holidays. He had sat in on supplier negotiations. He had watched his father shake hands and argue prices and read people's faces. What he had absorbed without realizing it was not just commercial instinct. It was documentation instinct. His father had always said, "If it is not written, it did not happen." Tariq said this about business. He said it about agreements. He said it about promises. Adam had taken this lesson seriously in every part of his life except, it turned out, the one part that mattered most. There was something else about Adam that was easy to miss in those early years. He kept records. Not just business records, everyone kept those. He kept personal records. A notes file on his phone that he updated at the end of almost every significant business day. Conversations summarized. Decisions logged. Disagreements noted. Not out of paranoia, but out of habit. He had been doing it since he was a young analyst at the freight forwarding company, keeping a kind of private professional journal. He never mentioned this to anyone. It simply wasn't something he talked about, but that habit, that quiet, methodical record-keeping that nobody knew about, would become the foundation of everything that came after. To understand how Adam built his response, you have to understand what he actually knew that most people around him did not. During his 3 years at the freight forwarding company before starting TrackBridge, Adam had worked under a man named Kamal Siddiqui. Kamal was not famous. He was not particularly wealthy. But he was, by any measure, one of the most meticulous commercial thinkers Adam had ever encountered. Kamal had spent 20 years building and losing and rebuilding a small logistics consultancy. He had been cheated by a business partner in 1998, a full account of which he shared with Adam over 3 separate lunch conversations in 2013. That experience had turned Kamal into something of an obsessive on the subject of corporate documentation, shareholder rights under Pakistani company law, and what he called the gap between what people think the law protects and what the law actually protects. He had given Adam 2 books, both dense, both dry, on the Securities and Exchange Commission of Pakistan's regulatory framework and on the specific procedures under the Companies Act for validating equity transfers. Adam had read both of them. Twice, at the time, it had seemed like intellectual curiosity. He was young, he was interested in business, and Kamal was an engaging teacher. But what Kamal had actually given him was a working knowledge of exactly what had to happen legally, procedurally, and on paper for a share transfer to be valid under Pakistani corporate law, specifically the Companies Act 2017 that replaced the old 1984 ordinance. A share transfer in a private limited company required a properly executed instrument of transfer, signed by the transferor, meaning the person giving away the shares, in the presence of a witness, submitted to the company secretary and recorded in the company's share register. The company's board had to approve the transfer. And critically, there was a 30-day notice period during which other shareholders had the right of first refusal. Adam knew all of this. He had known it since 2013, though what he also knew, and this is the part that mattered, was that the holding entity registered in his father's name, the one the shares had allegedly been transferred to, had been incorporated in August 2018, 1 month before the date on the transfer deed. That timing meant nothing to most people. To Adam, it meant everything, because it meant the transfer had been structured to coincide with a specific event, the company's first serious acquisition conversation. In July 2018, a mid-sized regional logistics firm based in Dubai, Al Freight Partners, had made a preliminary approach to Trackbridge about a potential acquisition or majority stake purchase. The valuation they had mentioned, informally, was in the range of 85 million Pakistani rupees. His father had been in that first meeting. Adam had not been told about a second meeting that had apparently taken place in August 2018 while Adam was traveling to Lahore to finalize a client contract. He only discovered this because of a note he had made in his phone on August 14, 2018. A reminder to call a contact at Al Muddakin after returning from Lahore. When he called, the contact was friendly but strangely careful. He mentioned that the family situation had been discussed. Adam had noted this in his journal as odd phrasing, follow up. He had not followed up immediately. He had been busy. The company was growing by March 2019, when the document was placed in front of him at that law office. Adam had enough fragments to reconstruct the full picture. He just needed to confirm one thing before he moved, and what he confirmed that afternoon changed everything. The full picture, when Adam finally assembled it over the following 2 weeks, was worse than he had initially understood. It wasn't simply that his father had forged his signature on a share transfer deed. That alone would have been a serious legal matter. But the structure of what had been done was considerably more sophisticated, which suggested to Adam that his father had not acted alone. The holding company, registered in August 2018 under the name Karimi Commercial Holdings, Private Limited, had 2 directors. One was Tariq. The other was Amir Faisi, a corporate lawyer Adam had never met but whose name appeared on several documents he began pulling from the SEC's public registry. Amir Faisi had a small firm in Clifton, Karachi. His specialty, according to the firm's website, was corporate restructuring and equity planning. The share transfer deed, once Adam obtained a full copy through the law firm, he had kept his face completely neutral when he asked for it, showed his signature, his CNIC number, and a witness signature from a man named Fahad Noor. Adam had never heard of Fahad Noor, but the deeper problem was the timing in relation to the Al Muddakin negotiation, in the 3 months following the forged transfer, October, November, and December of 2018, Al-Muttikin had continued conversations with Trackbridge. Adam had been involved in these conversations. He had prepared the financial projections. He had built the technical due diligence documentation. He had been present at every meeting. What he had not known was that, on paper, he was no longer the majority shareholder. The forged transfer had reduced his stake from 60% to 20%. His father's stake, through Karimi Commercial Holdings, was now 80%. This meant that if the Al-Muttikin deal closed, Adam would receive 20% of the sale proceeds. His father would receive 80%. On an 85 million rupee deal, that difference was 51 million rupees. But there was a second layer to this. And this layer was the one that kept Adam awake in January and February of 2019 as he began to suspect what had happened. Al-Muttikin's due diligence team. The third entry was the one that mattered most. It was from July 14, 2018, the day of the first Al-Muttikin meeting. Adam had noted the participants, the key points discussed, and, out of habit, the fact that the meeting had been recorded on his phone's voice memo application. He had been in the habit of recording important business meetings as personal reference. He noted the file name. He opened the voice memo folder on his old backup phone, a device he had replaced in October 2018 but still kept in a desk drawer, and found the file. He listened to it in full. 62 minutes. Toward the end of the recording, the Al-Muttikin representative had asked directly, "And in terms of the shareholding, this is a founder-held structure? No outside equity?" His father had answered, "Yes. Adam holds the majority. 60% founding stake. Clean structure." That was the moment Adam understood that he had everything he needed. What they didn't realize was that 4 years of quiet documentation had turned an ordinary phone into an archive that no lawyer could explain away. Adam did not move immediately. That was the first and most important decision he made on March 19th, 2 days after he found the voice recording. He called a lawyer, not the firm where the document had been placed before him, but a different one. A woman named Shaheen Mirza, who ran a 2-partner corporate litigation practice in Gulshan-e-Iqbal and who had a reputation in Karachi's legal community for being unusually methodical and almost completely immune to pressure. He met her on March 21st, a Thursday afternoon. He brought everything: the founding documents from 2015, the forged transfer deed, his phone notes exported to a printed PDF, 87 pages, the voice recording from July 2018, and the SECP public registry documents showing the incorporation date of Karimi Commercial Holdings. Shaheen Mirza listened without interrupting for 40 minutes. Then she asked him 3 questions. She asked whether he had told anyone else about this yet. He had not. She asked whether he had taken any action, any communication, any confrontation that could be construed as acceptance of the new share structure. He had not. She asked whether the Al-Muttikin deal had formally advanced to a binding term sheet. It had not. It was still in due diligence, she told him. You have a better case than most people who come in here. But the window is narrow, and we cannot be visible until we are ready. Do nothing that signals you are aware of the full picture. Adam nodded. Over the following 3 weeks, Shaheen Mirza's office prepared 2 parallel filings. The first was a formal complaint to the Sex Company Registration Office citing procedural irregularities in the share transfer, specifically the absence of a board resolution approving the transfer, the absence of any record of a right of first refusal notice to Adam as the other original shareholder, and the failure to follow the mandated 30-day period. These were not minor technicalities. Under the Companies Act 2017, a share transfer executed without these steps was void, not voidable, but void. As if it had never happened. The second filing was a request for a stay order through the Sindh High Court, preventing any finalization of the Al-Muttikin acquisition pending resolution of the shareholding dispute. The stay order application was filed on April 7, 2019, 17 days before the projected term sheet signing. What made the filing remarkable was its precision. It cited 12 specific procedural violations. It attached the voice recording transcript. It cited the phone note entries as corroborating contemporaneous records. It named Amir Faisi, the lawyer who had structured the holding company, as a respondent. On April 9, 2019, the Sindh High Court granted an interim stay. The Al-Muttakhin signing was halted, and Tariq Karimi received formal notice from the SECP and the court on the same day. Adam had not yet said a single word to his father about any of it. That was deliberate. Shaheen Mirza had advised him to let the paperwork speak before he did. And she was right, because what happened in the 2 weeks after April 9th was something Adam had not fully anticipated. His father's lawyer, Amir Faisi, filed a counter-response claiming that the share transfer was the result of a verbal agreement between Adam and Tariq, that Adam had agreed to restructure his equity in exchange for a reduced salary draw during the early years of the company, and that the transfer had been executed with Adam's constructive consent. It was, Shaheen Mirza told Adam when they reviewed the filing together, an almost impressively weak argument. But it was also a signal. It meant that his father's legal team did not know about the voice recording. Shaheen Mirza's response to the counterfiling included the full audio transcript as an exhibit. After that, there was a silence of about 11 days from the other side. No further filings. No communications through counsel. Just silence. And that's when things took a different turn. On April 28, 2019, Adam received a message from Al-Muttakhin Freight Partners. It was from the senior representative he had dealt with, a man named Khalid al-Rashidi, and it was brief. It said that Al-Muttakhin had been made aware of the ongoing legal proceedings and that, as a matter of policy, they were suspending all acquisition discussions until the shareholding structure of Trackbridge was formally resolved. This was, on the surface, a setback. The deal Adam had spent months preparing for was now indefinitely on hold. The 85 million rupees that had been a vague but motivating possibility was now frozen behind a legal process that could take months. But Adam read the message 3 times and felt something he had not expected: relief. Not because the money didn't matter. It mattered. But because Khalid's message contained a specific phrase: until the shareholding structure is formally resolved. Not until the dispute is settled. Not if the matter is dismissed. The word resolved. It implied that Al-Muttakhin intended to continue the conversation once clarity existed. They had not walked away. They were waiting. Adam showed the message to Shaheen Mirza. She agreed with his reading of it. She also shared something she had learned through a professional contact: that Amir Faisi had quietly withdrawn from active representation of Karimi Commercial Holdings 3 days after the voice recording transcript was filed. He had cited a conflict of interest in his withdrawal notice. This was, Shaheen explained, a common behavior when a lawyer realizes that the case they've been part of may cross from civil dispute into criminal territory. Witness forgery of a financial instrument under Pakistani law is not a civil matter. It is criminal. Amir Faisi, it appeared, had no interest in being Tariq Karimi's last line of defense. Tariq was now without his primary legal architect. His new representation, a more conventional firm from Sadar, filed a procedural delay request in the SECP proceedings. It was denied. Adam went back to work. Not symbolically. Literally. He sat down at his desk and focused entirely on Trackbridge's operations, signing 3 new manufacturing clients in Faisalabad in May 2019, finalizing a platform upgrade with Sana Rashid, and building the documentation package that would be needed for any future acquisition conversation he wanted. When the resolution came, to hand over a company that was unambiguously better than the one the acquirer had originally evaluated. The SEC's formal ruling came on July 3, 2019. It was comprehensive. The Commission found that the share transfer to Karimi Commercial Holdings had been executed without a valid board resolution, without the mandatory right of first refusal process, and without a properly witnessed signature from the transferor. The Commission's language was precise. The transfer instrument was declared void ab initio, void from the beginning, with no legal force or effect from the date of its purported execution. Adam's shareholding was restored to 60% as of the original founding registration in 2015. The company's share register was ordered to be corrected. Karimi Commercial Holdings' 80% stake was reduced to zero. Tariq Karimi's original 40% founding stake, which had never been in dispute, was confirmed. The SEC also referred the matter to the Federal Investigation Agency for review of potential criminal liability related to document forgery. On July 5, 2019, Adam received a call from Khalid al-Rashidi at Al-Mutakin. Khalid had, apparently, been monitoring the proceedings. He said, "I saw the ruling. Congratulations. When would you like to restart our conversation?" The acquisition discussions resumed in August 2019, but this time, the terms were different. And the 3 months between the stay order and the SEC ruling, Adam had signed 7 additional clients. Monthly recurring revenue had grown from 380,000 rupees in March to 620,000 rupees by July. The technical platform had been upgraded significantly. And because the legal proceedings had attracted quiet attention in Karachi's commercial community, people talk in that world. Even when cases aren't public, 2 other parties had made informal inquiries about TrackBridge, a Pakistani conglomerate with logistics interests, and a Singapore-based supply chain technology fund. Competition, as it turned out, was the most powerful negotiating tool Adam had never planned to use. The final acquisition offer from Al-Mutakin, submitted in November 2019, was for a 55% majority stake at a valuation of 147 million Pakistani rupees. More than 70% higher than the figure that had been on the table when the forgery had been arranged. Adam's 60% founding stake, at that valuation, was worth 88 million rupees. Under the original forged structure, he would have received 20%, roughly 29 million rupees. The difference was 59 million rupees. And that was before the earn-out clauses for performance in years 2 and 3. He signed the deal on December 14, 2019. The commercial community in Karachi is not large, and it has a long memory. Within weeks of the SEC ruling becoming known, and these things always become known, the dynamics around TrackBridge and Adam Karimi shifted in ways that were difficult to attribute to any single conversation but were unmistakable in their effect. Hafiz Bhatti, the logistics veteran who had laughed at Adam's pitch at a dinner in 2016, reached out through a mutual contact in August 2019 to request a meeting. He wanted, the message said, to discuss potential collaboration opportunities. Adam's assistant replied that Adam's schedule was fully committed for the quarter. The WhatsApp group, where someone had posted a negative review of the app in 2016, now had members who were posting about the SEC ruling and the company's growth figures. The tone was different. Nobody was laughing. Adam's uncle, the one who had told his father that TrackBridge was a child science project, sent a formal congratulatory message after the acquisition announcement. Adam read it, noted it in his phone journal with a date, and did not reply. Amir Faisi, the lawyer who had structured Karimi Commercial Holdings and then quietly withdrawn, was reported by multiple sources to be under investigation by the Pakistan Bar Council. His firm's website was taken down in September 2019. Within TrackBridge itself, the team, particularly Sana Rashid and Imran, who had been with the company since the early days, learned gradually what had happened. Adam had not told them during the proceedings. He hadn't wanted the distraction or the atmosphere of uncertainty to affect the work. When the ruling came down and the deal was announced, Sana had simply said, "I always thought you were too calm about things. Now I know why." But what nobody talked about directly, and what Adam himself never made into a public statement, was what happened with his father. The day the SEC ruling was issued, Tariq Karimi's 40% founding stake in TrackBridge was still intact. He had not been stripped of his legitimate equity. The ruling had only voided the forged transfer. In legal terms, Tariq remained a 40% shareholder, which meant that when the acquisition closed in December 2019, Tariq Karimi received 40% of the sale proceeds. At the 147 million rupee valuation, that was 58.8 million rupees. Adam had not tried to take that from him. He had the means and arguably the moral argument to pursue a broader civil suit. Shaheen Mirza had outlined the options. Adam had chosen not to. His reasoning, when pressed by Shaheen, was brief. The law gave him what he legitimately built. It took back what he tried to take illegitimately. That's enough. By the end of 2020, Trackbridge had grown into something that bore little physical resemblance to the 180-square-foot room on Zybunisa Street where it had started. Under the Almutican acquisition structure, Adam retained a 45% stake and the role of CEO. The integration brought capital, distribution networks, and a Dubai-based team that opened the Gulf corridor for the platform's expansion. By December 2020, Trackbridge had 47 manufacturing clients across Pakistan and 3 clients in the UAE, with monthly recurring revenue of 4.1 million rupees, a tenfold increase from where it had been in early 2019. Sana Rashid was promoted to Chief Technology Officer. Imran became the head of the Pakistan commercial team. 2 additional developers were brought on from a university partnership with Fast Newses in Karachi, the Singapore-based supply chain technology fund that had made an informal inquiry during the acquisition process became a minority investor in the Almutican Trackbridge joint entity in early 2021 at a valuation that had grown to 310 million rupees. Adam's retained stake was now worth approximately 139 million rupees on paper. None of this happened dramatically. It happened the way most real things happen, through a sequence of ordinary days that added up to something significant only in retrospect. The litigation with the FIA regarding document forgery moved slowly, as Pakistani criminal proceedings tend to. As of late 2021, the matter had not been formally resolved. Adam did not press it. He had made his position known to the authorities and had cooperated fully with their inquiry. What happened after that was not his to control. The platform itself continued to evolve. In 2021, Trackbridge launched an API integration that connected directly with Pakistan Customs' WBOC system, allowing real-time customs status tracking for the first time in the company's history. This feature alone was cited by 3 new enterprise clients as the primary reason for switching from competitors. In 2022, Adam hired a young woman named Zara Ahmed, 24 years old, recently graduated from IBA Karachi, as a business analyst. She reminded him, he later said to a colleague, of himself at that age. She was quiet, she listened longer than people expected, and she kept notes on her phone. He made sure, on her first week, to sit down with her and explain the company's full shareholder structure, the cap table, and the exact legal documentation that underpinned every equity arrangement in the business. He told her about Kamal Siddiqui's 2 books. He suggested she read both. She asked him why this was the first thing he was teaching her, before product or sales or operations. He thought about it for a moment and said, "Because everything else builds on top of it. If the foundation isn't clear, nothing you build on top of it is safe." By 2023, Trackbridge had processed over 2.3 million shipment records since its founding. Its documentation trail was immaculate, by design, from the very beginning, because the person who built it had learned, through the most personal possible experience, what immaculate documentation was worth. Adam had, by that point, become something of a quiet reference point in Karachi's startup community. Not a celebrity, not a speaker at large conferences. He gave one talk in early 2022 at a small entrepreneurship event at IBA Karachi. The talk was not about technology or growth or fundraising. It was about corporate governance for founders, about shareholders' registers and transfer procedures and the specific sections of the Companies Act that most founders never read until it's too late. He did not mention his father by name. He did not tell the full story. But the people in the room who had heard fragments of it understood what was underneath every sentence. After the talk, 3 young founders came up to him, separately with questions. 2 of them wanted to know about equity structuring. One of them, a 22-year-old building a fintech product, asked about how to handle a business partnership with a family member. Adam gave him the same answer he would have given anyone. Document everything, no matter how much you trust them. Not because trust is wrong, but because documentation protects the trust. Because when things go wrong, and sometimes they go wrong in ways you cannot predict, a written record is not an accusation. It's a foundation. Zara Ahmed, by 2023, had been promoted to strategy manager. She had, on her own initiative, redesigned TrackBridge's internal governance documentation and introduced a quarterly shareholder registry audit process. She had not been asked to do this. She had simply done it. When Adam reviewed her proposal, he approved it in under 5 minutes and added one line to the memo: "Make this standard." What started as one man's personal record-keeping habit had, by that point, become institutional policy. There is a version of this story that becomes about revenge. People like that version. It's satisfying and it's simple. A man was wronged, he struck back, he won. But that's not quite what happened here. What happened was that a 29-year-old sat down in a law office, saw his name on a document he had never signed, and made a choice, not in that moment, but in every moment before it. He had kept records when he had no reason to expect they would be needed. He had learned things that seemed abstract until they weren't. He had watched, listened, and written it all down. Not out of suspicion. Out of discipline. The revenge people imagine when they hear the story is emotional. The real story is methodical. And that's what makes it harder to replicate but more worth understanding, because the question the story really asks is not, what do you do when someone betrays you? It's, what kind of person do you become in all the years before that moment? What do you learn quietly and without an audience? What do you record when nothing seems to be at stake? The signature his father forged was ink on paper. The archive Adam had built over years. Phone notes, meeting recordings, a deep and patient understanding of the law. That was something no one could forge and no transfer deed could erase. Some foundations are built quietly over years, with no one watching. You don't know they're there until the moment you need them, and then suddenly you know exactly why you built them.